Bonds are breaking, ratings are irrelevant, AI giants are splitting paths, and Klarna still can't repossess a burrito. Yeah, it's been that kind of week. From Vigilantes shaking the bond market to Moody's downgrade no one asked for, this week was chaos wrapped in capital letters. Meta fumbled another AI launch, Google's out here trying to actually profit, and Klarna's drowning in unsecured debt because makeup and burritos don't have resale value. Don't worry, we explain the difference between debt types too. Watch the full video. Because this isn't just finance, it's a front row seat to the system cracking in real time.
Hi, everyone. I'm Gary Brode from Deep Knowledge Investing. We work with hedge funds, family offices, registered investment advisors, and individuals like you to help you get better returns in the stock market. I'm here with our host, Rob Farian. He's the CEO and founder of Flying V, our digital marketing partner. Rob, happy Memorial Day. And where are you? I know you've been traveling as well.
I'm back home, Gary. Happy Memorial Day. Yes. Five things keeps rolling on no matter what. Federal holidays, whatever other holidays we keep rolling. So happy Memorial Day to you. But yeah, I'm home base. I believe you're in Florida. I think you're trying to
Uh,
get the tan I have.
yeah, I'm working on it. It's going to take me a little more time. I'm in Jupiter, Florida right now. I'm actually at the home of one of our board members, Howard Friedland. We're having dinner together tonight with his family, which I'm looking forward to. Separately from that, earlier in the week, I drove across the state and was hosted by the people at Ninja Trader. I'm wearing the Ninja Trader swag right here. But it was great, getting to meet Tracy Schuchart and, Anthony in the studio. We did the whole morning show together. It was a lot of fun, and then I got to drive back across the state again with the swag, which was nice. And then the only other thing, Memorial Day is a special day. My grandfather fought with the 80th Airborne in World War II. He fought through France and Germany and was there for part of Reconstruction. And one of the things I used to do every year that made him feel amazing was every year on Memorial Day, I would call him and remind him of how happy I was that we were not celebrating him on that day, which always made him feel great. We were lucky he came back, uninjured and in great shape. But for those of you who are watching who have lost friends or family members as part of the military service, we're sorry for your loss and have nothing but respect for our armed forces.
Yeah, no doubt. And Gary, I think I echoed those same sentiments to all those that have lost loved ones. Definitely, obviously, that sacrifice not made in vain, and allows us the opportunity to even do what we're doing now here on this show. So, great stuff, Gary. Thanks for laying that out. And yeah, to everybody out there, have a happy Memorial Day. And remember those that have served and paid the ultimate sacrifice. Gary, today, five things. We're calling it the government needs a new credit score issue. Super exciting. Government credit repair. Maybe that's a new company, Gary, that we could spin off off of this show. But we're
Right? We
talking
can we
Japan.
can advise the Treasury on how to get a better credit
Yeah,
rating.
yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. Pay for service, pay for play as well. But we're talking Japan. Some bond stuff is resurfacing. Moody's downgrade. We'll touch on that. Both Meta and Google talking about AI. Both those guys had some conferences recently where they talked about next steps and what they're working on. And then we'll talk about Klarna. And finally, in our education section, secured and unsecured debt. What's the difference between those two things? Gary will break all that down and more on this episode of The Five Things. Gary, let's get into it. First, thing number one, the Bond Vigilantes arrive. What do we do now? Oh no, thing number one, Gary, the Bond Vigilantes arrive. The Bond Vigilantes are here. Tell us more.
All right. So first, let's explain to people what and who the bond vigilantes are. Countries like Japan that have a 260% debt to GDP ratio, and the US, by the way, the US, people look at our 36, $37 trillion of debt, they think, okay, that's manageable. We have $250 billion of on and off balance sheet debt that will never be paid. There is no level of taxation or reasonable economic growth that results in us having $250 billion, $250 trillion to pay. And the thing is, we've known that. We've known that for decades. I remember in 1995 looking at the balance sheet of the US government and the direction things were going and thinking, this isn't going to work. It just doesn't work. We can't have the kinds of programs we have with the size of the economy that we have, especially with an aging country. And so, I've known for decades this wasn't going to work. And people always ask me, okay, when? When do we pay the price for this? When is this a problem? And the answer is it depends on the bond market. Now, the bond market up until now has been willing to take the next $1 trillion of financings. And when they do that, okay, they're willing to buy that risk and the government can go on, printing more paper. But when the market refuses, right, when the bond market, when the bond vigilantes don't show up and they refuse to buy the next round of debt, what happens is there's a lack of demand. Bond prices fall, that leads to higher yields, and that is said to be the work of the bond vigilantes. So the scary bond vigilantes are the people who choose not to buy the next financing and cause countries like Japan and the US and the EU is not in great shape. China has debt problems. The whole world has debt problems. And it causes those countries to have to pay the price for excessive use of debt, for spending beyond their means, just like any of us would if we ran up our credit card too high. Our version of bond vigilantes are the credit card companies who say, yeah, we're not going to finance you anymore. So at this point, our line is they may not have arrived yet in force, but a few of them are definitely peeking in the doorway. This past week, Japan had a horrible 30-year and a horrible 40-year debt auction. The yield on the Japanese 30-year government bond was 2.59% a month and a half ago. It's now up to 3.15%. The 40-year in that time went from 2.58% to 3.62%, rising more than 100 basis points in just a month and a half. On the U.S. side, the 30-year U.S. Treasury yield in that same time frame rose from 4.39% to 5.09%. We're talking about a 70 basis point move in 6 weeks. These are huge moves. And last week, the U.S. had a 20-year bond auction that had a huge tail. That's just a fancy finance way of saying there were fewer bidders than expected, and the ensuing yield, the ending yield on that auction was higher than expected. Now, for those of you who aren't following the bond market every day, which is a very healthy way to go through life, the only thing I can tell you is that these are enormous moves. These are huge moves in long dated government securities. And we'd add extra emphasis for the fact that this just happened in the world's reserve currency. That's the place investors go when they want to seek safety. So our question to bond owners, are you feeling safe right now? Because I know I wouldn't be if I owned government bonds.
Yeah, Gary, some would think that the higher yields would actually bolster the dollar. Do you see that being the case with what we're seeing here with this bond market?
So that's typically the case, Rob. And like think through, and it's not happening now, but think through like the logic of this. If we were to say to you, okay, buy our debt, we'll pay you 1%, people might say, well, that's not very appealing at all. Say, okay, we'll buy our debt, we'll pay you 5%. And people might say, okay, wow, that's really good. And remember, in order to buy US Treasuries, you have to have dollars. So if you're in a foreign country, you've got to buy dollars and then you use those dollars to buy treasuries. So typically, when a yield goes up, it makes your underlying currency, your fiat, more attractive, and the value of it, the strength of it, will go up with higher interest rates. Now, that's not happening, and what's going on is last week we saw the price of gold was up. It's very near all-time highs, and Bitcoin hit multiple all-time highs this week. I took a look earlier today. We were at 110,000 US dollars per Bitcoin. It hit an all-time high last week of just under 112,000. And so those are indications. The strength in these dollar alternatives indicate a weak dollar. And my view on it is that our financial system is completely unsustainable. And, I'm going to remind people, for those of you who have been long-term viewers of the five things, thank you for being with us. We appreciate it. But you'll remember, I spent all of 2024 telling everybody, no matter who won last November's election, the overspending and dollar debasement would continue, that we couldn't vote our way out of this problem. There are lots of reasons to vote for, your team, your party, your favored politician. And that's great, but no matter who we put in power, Congress is going to overspend. And, that will lead to more dollar debasement, which is just a fancy way of saying a weaker dollar. So we have to pay the higher interest rates to deal with the bond vigilantes. It's just too much debt hitting the system. But all of that debt hitting the system is reducing the value of the dollar, which is something that everybody here is experiencing in the form of inflation. Again, a fancy way of saying you have lower purchasing power in the dollar. The final thing on this is that when Treasury auctions have fewer buyers and the yields spike, as we just explained, that increases the borrowing costs of the government at the same time that the amount borrowed rises. So if you're paying a higher interest rate on more debt, what happens, right? Your interest expense skyrockets. What do we do then? We print more dollars to pay the difference. That leads to higher budget deficits, more inflation, higher bond yields, wash, rinse, repeat. And there we go, right? That's exactly what happens there.
Yeah, great stuff there, Gary. And if you're looking for any additional resources on inflation, interest rates, be sure just to hit us with an email, ir@deepknowledgeinvesting.com. We've got some great resources, white papers, ebooks that Gary has written in the past that cover this topic at length, especially if you're new to DKI. Gary's been talking about government overspending, inflation, Fed interest rates for a long time now, and we will continue to do so and keep track on everything happening in those bond markets as well. Gary,
Rob,
we're going to.
let's
Yeah,
add, hang on, before we move on, let's just add one thing for the people who are interested in this topic, who want to learn more about it. I wrote an article about this, talking about what was going on in Japan and the US, deals with this at greater length. It's not a particularly long piece, but you'll be able to go into more detail. If you go to deepknowledgeinvesting.com, there's a research tab. Click that and take a look. Last week, there's a post called It's the Bond Market. Here's what we do. And we explain how DKI subscribers were well prepared and well positioned for exactly what happened last week. So when the markets were panicking on this, we were actually making money. We were prepared for that situation. And I give people a description of, this is how we were prepared. This is why we were positioned this way. And we take people through it. And because we wanted people to understand it, it's an important topic. That post is not paywalled. So you're welcome to go check it out for free.
Great stuff. Yeah, thanks, Gary, for adding that. Definitely will be in the written version of the 5 things if you haven't already read it, as well as will be delivered to our free subscribers in their written version of the 5 things on Wednesday. Moving forward, we're going to talk Moody's. They've downgraded US Treasuries. Gary's going to tell us why we don't care at Deep Knowledge Investing. Thing number 2, Moody's US downgrade is meaningless.
Yeah, Rob, I love doing this to you, right? The marketing guys love when I say, here's why what I'm about to tell you doesn't matter at all, right?
It's
Terrific.
that reverse psychology you're so good at.
Exactly, right? In fact, for those of you, like, if you're short on time, you can just tune out right now. The Moody's downgrade doesn't matter. Just move on, go watch something else. You'll be all set. But if you're still here and you want to like and subscribe, that would be great. We'd appreciate the help. Anyway, Moody's is one of 3 big bond rating agencies. Fitch and S&P Global are the other 2. And this week, Moody's became the last of the 3 to downgrade US Treasuries. They didn't downgrade them a lot, but the highest Moody's rating is AAA, their triple A rating, and they downgraded to the slightly lower AA1 rating. There were lots of hysterical headlines in the press, but the market pretty much shrugged and largely ignored the insult. For once, I agree with the market on this. They got it right. The press was completely wrong. The entire investing world already knows that the US has over $36 trillion of debt. Everybody already knows that interest expense is skyrocketing. It was skyrocketing. It was 600 billion just a couple years ago. I think this year they're looking at something more like 1.5 trillion. It's going to be bigger than our military spending. It's the size of our social security spending at this point. And a lot of people already know there are about $200 trillion of unfunded liabilities. Those are liabilities for programs like Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. And right now, the Republican-led Congress is in the process of signing off on more multi-trillion-dollar deficits. If you're one of the Democrats, don't take a victory lap yet. The Republicans are just following in the footsteps of the fiscally irresponsible Democrats. Both parties are irresponsible. Team Red spends too much. Team Blue spends too much. Whichever side you're on, we're all voting for people who spend too much. As we keep saying, and as we just said in the prior segment, we cannot vote our way out of our financial problems. And that's why Treasury yields are rising. So the point of all this is the market knows all of this. Everybody who follows finance, even at a basic level, knows this. Moody's downgraded more than a dozen years after one of the other ratings agencies did. I mean, this has just been going on for decades. Doing this now, everybody already knew this. It wasn't news, and the market said we don't care, and that was the right response.
Gary, with everybody knowing about the financial problems the government's had and the U.S. has been going on for years, why now, right? Why did it take Moody's so long to downgrade? Why did they downgrade now?
The timing was suspicious. I think, and many others think, that it was a partisan political move. So just to give you a sense, S&P Standard & Poor's downgraded US Treasuries in 2011, so that's 14 years ago. Fitch followed in 2023, 2 years ago. So Moody's is years late, and somehow they managed to do this and deliver the downgrade while Congress was in session debating this year's big spending bill. Like the timing led everybody with a brain to reasonably conclude it was a political shot against the current White House. Which, okay, go ahead, take the shot, but it doesn't change the fact that both parties overspend. It doesn't change the fact that they're going to overspend the dollar into oblivion. And I would just remind people that when Moody's does stuff like this, all it does is weakens their brand. Once people say, I see, you're not really sharp pencil, smart bond people, you're just taking a political shot, then half the country's going to tune out and not pay attention. We'd also remind everybody that all three ratings agencies have a conflict-ridden business where they're paid by the companies they rate. One result of that was all three of these rating agencies completely missed on their subprime property loan ratings during the run-up to 2008. In other words, who cares what they think? It's a conflict-ridden business model, and because of that, they're regularly wrong. Moody's can do whatever in the world they want. Nobody cares. No one's paying attention at this point.
Yeah, and I mean, Gary, with that, I mean, how closely tied to reality is this? I mean, is this a situation where Moody's is saying that the U.S. could technically default? And I'm asking that question for the crowd out there because we obviously know that answer.
Yeah, exactly. So, we did put something in the written version of the five things. I knew, we were going to get some sharp pencil person to say, the US can't default. We print, our debt is denominated in dollars. We can create an unlimited number of dollars. Therefore, we can print as many dollars as we need to repay any debt. And therefore, we can't default. And guess what? That is technically correct. The bond market is expressing concern that the dollars used to pay those debts will have little value, right? So, for instance, in the prior section, we were talking about the large tail on last week's 20-year Treasury auction. The reason the yield is up so much in the 20 and 30-year Treasuries isn't because people think the US Treasury can't print dollars to pay the debt. The issue is they're worried that over the next 20, 30 years, congressional overspending and dollar printing will lead us to the point where, okay, they'll pay us back, but they're going to pay in dollars that have very little value. Inflation or dollar debasement as a result of seniorage, again, that's just a fancy way of saying the value of being the one who gets to print the money gets to steal from that, right? That's really what seniorage and inflation is. The government prints the money and then they steal from us through inflation. They keep some of that value, right? Remember, when we talk about inflation robbing you of your purchasing power, where does it go? Who gets it? The answer is whoever controls the money first. In this case, it's going to be, congressional spending. It's going to be the banks, the Federal Reserve, the institutions that are closest and can spend the money before inflation comes in. So the point of all this is the U.S. won't default, but it could be a stealth default where, you buy a bond now and in 20 years, you know, they'll pay you back. They'll give you your $1,000. The question is, what can you buy with that $1,000 in
Right.
20 years?
Right. Right. Great stuff there, Gary. And moving forward, this is this week's version of the 5 things to know in investing. The government needs a new credit score issue. We'd love if you subscribe, like, comment. Let us know if you agree, disagree, any questions that you might have on this video. You can also send in questions to ir@deepknowledgeinvesting.com, or you can use the Ask Gary feature on the website as well. And as always, be sure to sign up for a free subscription. You'll get all the written versions of the 5 things on a weekly basis, as well as notified of other content posted on the site. But just so you know, some of that may be paywalled for our premium subscribers who get access to all content, premium content, current recommendations, and the like. Moving forward on to thing number 3, we're talking Meta now in their AI space and their Llama platform. We're seeing that that's not advancing as quickly as they would hope. We're seeing that maybe Meta's AI program not as big or as tough as we thought. Thing number 3, Gary, Meta AI hits a rough patch. Tell us what's going on with their Llama 4 model behemoth.
So this delay, as you just pointed out, Rob, relates to its Llama 4 model, and it's called the Behemoth model because it is enormous. The model supposedly features 400 billion parameters. That's more than 5 times the size of Llama 2's largest version, and it was supposed to be positioned to compete with OpenAI's ChatGPT, Google's Gemini. But what happened was they were supposed to release it in April, then they were supposed to release it in June. Now it's been postponed. As of now, we have not seen a new release date. And the reason is there are internal concerns that the performance gains are not sufficient to warrant deployment, right? If you're going to release a whole new model, you really need to have much better performance. Otherwise, people say, well, this is not exciting at all. Internal reviews there that have been publicly released or leaked. They cite poor inference efficiency. By the way, inference, that's the thing that models like DeepSeek are really good at, although they don't save energy despite what, DeepSeek had said. But back to the Llama 4 model. So poor inference efficiency, underwhelming accuracy improvements, growing skepticism among Meta's engineers. Basically, with this kind of delay, there's leadership frustration, increased scrutiny of the broader AI roadmap. The whole thing really leads people to question the possible inefficiency of future or further scaling. And people are starting to wonder, wait a minute, if they pour tens of billions of dollars of resources into the next model and we're getting diminishing returns, right, then maybe scale isn't the guarantee of meaningful progress in generative AI that we had hoped it would be. And Meta, I think their budget this year for capital expenditures is $72 billion. That's an enormous number. And a lot of that's directed at AI. So, they really need to get something out of this.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. What, Gary, the implications of, okay, these models, how does that kind of impact other AI models? Obviously, knowing Meta's place in the space and the tech space as a leader, are they going to have enough information to help train that next generation of AI? Or does this kind of stall that progress, knowing how big of a player Meta is in the AI space already?
So I think that's the right question to ask, Rob. Now, at this point, a lot of the other hyperscalers, whether it's ChatGPT or Google's Gemini, they are making progress. And Meta running into delays on their model doesn't necessarily mean, oh no, the whole thing is worthless. Um, but I would just make 2 points. The first one is we've previously expressed a concern that many of the companies spending tens of billions of dollars on AI don't yet have a business model to earn a return on that spending. And that's something that we've been really focused on. Like, great, you're spending tens or hundreds of billions of dollars, but whether it works or not is one question. But even if it does work, you need a business model to get paid on it. The other thing, and this is a really interesting question to me. I've read reports that some of these models are running out of material to train on. And so the way these models work is they actually crawl millions and millions of articles and books and research papers and posts on Twitter or X or Facebook or wherever they can get information, wherever human beings are communicating and writing. Um, but we're at the point now, Rob, where some of these models are actually crawling the vast majority of human written communication that's been done before this. And
Mhm.
so they actually need to work on efficiency and having these models getting better at drawing conclusions because they're actually running out of material to train them on. And I know that sounds crazy, but these are companies with literally hundreds of thousands of NVIDIA's best chips, or sometimes even millions of NVIDIA's best chips. They are chewing through that material as quickly as it can be produced. And at this point, they've chewed through pretty much everything they can get their hands on, whether it's a book, a research paper, DKI's five things, everything. They're just running out of material to throw at these models.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that, Gary. And I'm going to go a little off topic and project here. Is I think part of it as well. It's like Google's so interesting from a search standpoint because it's constantly adding that new material to the web, right? Which is being crawled. Now, one of the things that we focus on the marketing side is SEO. You're hearing and like, okay, when we do post that content on the website, how do we get Google to come and look at it as quickly as possible? But the nice part for Google is that it has a constantly refilling index library of content and information, right? To where some of these other channels, like a Meta, they might be restricted, as you're saying, to where how much information they have or where are they sourcing that information. So just an interesting tidbit from my side, thinking about what you're saying in the content exhaustion. But that's where I think, people talk about this AI and overtaking Google search very quickly, but they forget, as you've mentioned, it's being trained on a finite amount of data and information, at least initially, until they start to roll out these new iterations. So it'll be very interesting to see those two battle it out, Google and Meta of the world, which I know we're going to talk about Google here in a second. But just
So,
an
Rob,
interesting on my
it,
side.
it is, and a little bit of a yes and no on your point. So you're completely right that Google, they're updating their SEO models every single day. And there's so much new information and so many new web pages that they're crawling those constantly. And then, as you well know, Google has a habit of changing the algorithm, the search algorithm. And that's a huge advantage for you and companies like Flying V because, like I don't spend all day figuring out how these models work and how to optimize, how to do search engine optimization, SEO. You guys do that on a daily basis, and Google is changing those models quickly enough that it
Yeah.
can become frustrating and a waste of time for me to do it. But your expertise in that area is a competitive advantage, and that's great for Flying V. And it feels like that's a lot, and it's a lot in the SEO world, but the amount of information being added to the web on a daily basis and these kinds of changes is not enough to change like an LLM, a large language model processor like Llama 4 or ChatGPT or Google Gemini. It's not enough to change those. Like literally, they're looking at hundreds of billions of components. So a day or a week or a month's worth of new web content isn't enough to push the needle on the LLMs or the AI
Hmm.
models.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, it's crazy just to think about the I still struggle. I'm in this day to day, right? And you still struggle with just the vastness when we talk about this information. Obviously, that goes to our conversations we've had about nuclear and our points there with AI and chips
Oh
and
yeah.
the acceleration of if you've got good technology, what happens? People use it more and more and more, right? More demand and more need.
Well,
So
I
yeah,
can
good.
certainly tell you we are going to be talking about nuclear power and uranium, nuclear energy in next week's five things. That is already queued up. There's too much going on. It's far too important. So, for those of you who are worried you'll forget, feel free to like, subscribe, hit the notifications, and we will be talking about that important topic next week.
Great stuff. And segue into thing number 4, Gary, we are talking about Google. They recently had one of their annual conferences. They call it the I/O, stands for Input Output Conference. And you mentioned it in our prior thing just about this AI, but what's the business model to actually earn a return on these massive investments that these tech companies are making into the AI space? So, Gary, thing number 4, you're going to get us all caught up to speed as Google pushes forward with AI at I/O, again, their input output conference.
So, Rob, when Google first released Gemini, it led to a huge amount of controversy and all kinds of problems. The model had a lot of difficulty dealing with racial issues. These are not things that we're going to be discussing here on the 5 things. We focus on finance, the markets, the economy. I don't want to dive into those kinds of controversial social and political issues. But all I can tell you is the model wasn't effective, and people found all kinds of funny and obnoxious and frightening ways to get the model to spit out horrendous results. So they've been working on it now, and from what I'm reading, they're making slow progress at making it better, and that's okay as long as it's heading in the right direction. The thing that I think is really interesting about Google's announcement, it's not so much that Gemini is so much better than it was a few months ago. It's that they talked a lot about new investments into software with the ability to monetize it. They're focusing on charging for AI infrastructure, charging for advanced capabilities. They talked about new investments in hardware ranging from smartphones to smart glasses. Google is one of those few companies like Apple that can make hardware and software. And so, one of the things that we talked about all last year and the first quarter and a half of this year is that these AI hyperscalers, again, some of them were spending hundreds of billions of dollars and had no plan for how they were going to earn a return on it. This I/O conference showed positive strategic signals in terms of AI advancement and monetization capacity. So, the market is a little skeptical of that, but it's actually a little bit of a relief to see that some of these companies are trying to figure out how do we make money from this. Now, I don't think Google's model, their Gemini model, is anywhere close to the best, but I do think it's smart that they're starting to think about how do we earn a return on all of these, NVIDIA chips. So that I viewed as a positive from the conference.
Gary, with the monetization of these AI investment, is there any reason that for Google in particular, it might be more important just in terms of them looking at ways to monetize and obviously recoup that capital expenditure back to investors?
Absolutely, Rob. That's the right question to be asking. For Google, this is crucial. So Google makes a ton of money from their search business where they have something like 90% share. And, they're constantly, including right now, facing all kinds of antitrust suits because they really do have a monopoly and they use it in ways to ensure that they benefit often at the expense of others, thus getting a lot of attention from antitrust regulators in both Europe and the US. Um, and the reason AI is such a threat to them is let's go back 5 years, Rob, and say you wanted to search for something, you wanted information. So you would go to probably Google, 90% of people do, and you put in your question or what you wanted more information on, and then Google would say, okay, well, here are some sponsored answers, and here are answers from people who have paid us, and the more they paid us, the higher it'll be. And then you scroll down a little bit, and you'll get the answers that come from Google's SEO models, right? And what their search engine thinks. And then, you would pick one or two or 10 links that you thought would be useful, and you click through and started reading to find the answer. Okay, well, for anything basic right now, what do? You go to one of the AI models, you go to ChatGPT, or I particularly like Grok on X. You ask the question, and instead of saying, here are a bunch of web pages that might have the answer you're looking for, what do? They say, here's the answer, and you don't need Google. And so, there's a bit of a scare a couple weeks ago when Apple said that Google search volume was declining on iPhones for the first time ever. And the reason for that very clearly is because people are going to the AI models to get the answers directly. And the more people go directly to AI to get answers to their questions rather than a link which may contain the answer to the question, that is a huge threat to Google's cash cow, their search business. So Google needs to, everybody's trying to get this right, but for Google, they need to get it right in a way that everybody else wants to, but doesn't necessarily need to.
Yeah, it's been something that we've been spending a ton of time on our side, Gary, is like what's changing in terms of search. And you're exactly right. You know, you look at Google and it's more of a finite 0 to 1, right? I search, I click, and if I get the answer, great, I'm done. And that's the goal. Chat GPT on the other side, Perplexity, we're calling it over at Flying V multi-turn conversations, right? So it's not just that individual search, it's probably 5 searches or 10 prompts or searches or whatever we want to call it, right? And so I don't know how they're calculating, obviously, this search volume, but if you're just taking it, you know, as a whole, right, it's like, okay, well, if it takes me 1 search on Google to get the answer, but then it's 10 queries or 10 conversations, right? Is that 10x the search volume? We're still trying to understand how they're quantifying that. But I think most importantly, what we're seeing is with the content, knowing that you have to provide content for all those different questions that the user might be asking. And sometimes you might have to be providing it in different ways, right? So we're really looking at how can we take a piece of content. This is a perfect example here on the 5 things, right? We sit down for an hour and we record one long session, but then guess what? We're cutting this up into different bits and pieces because there's a higher likelihood that when they're going through that multi-turn conversation, we're going to have a piece of material that specifically talks about that individual question, to where they might just have been searching that more broad, top level topic of conversation to get that Google search result. Then they're mining through the data within the actual article itself, right? So a big change for us is really creating the same types of content, high quality, right? User intent driven, search driven based on volume, but then looking at ways, how can we, okay, take a blog and turn it into a video, turn it into a YouTube short, a IG reel, a TikTok as well, because those are all those signals that this multi-turn, which is having so much more volume of search run through it, it needs all those different data points to pull from, is what we're seeing. So kind of a very high level approach on how we're looking at optimizing some of these AI platforms.
Yeah, it's great to know. And I know for myself, like just as an example, I'm traveling for a year. Before I did that, I bought a new laptop, and the keyboard is a little bit quirky on this. I don't have the same button layout I did on my prior laptop. Okay, not the end of the world, but I was trying to figure out how to do something, and it wasn't obvious to me what buttons to push on the keyboard. It's just a different layout. I went to Chat GPT and I said, "This is the computer I have, and this is what I'm trying to do." And it said, "Try pushing these buttons." And I said, "Well, that's not working." It said, "Okay, if that doesn't work, try this." I'm like, "Okay, that worked." They're like, "Great, glad I was able to help you." Now imagine, you know, I'm using a Samsung Galaxy Book. Samsung doesn't have those instructions on
Right.
their website. So what I would have to do is either play around with it, or you have to go to something like, like a Reddit message board, or go onto
Mm-hmm.
X and ask people, how do I do this? And then, you get 74 answers where people give you joking answers and they think they're really funny. And then eventually someone says, "Hey, try the thing that you would have done." I didn't even need to, I just typed the question in barely understandable English and got an answer.
Yeah, no, it's so interesting that you say that too, because that is a problem with, again, that finite search, right? Is okay, you might find something, but it's not specific to what it is you're looking for. And so that's where you hear about these inference models,
Right.
causal models, Bayesian modeling as well, right? To where, okay, you have the ability of that AI to actually think through the specific problem that you have, right? And then that's where we're getting into even the agentic conversations of, okay, yes, it is instructed to have this workflow, but that workflow also can start to change based on certain causes and effects that it may be getting with, I think Google's conference name is so great, based on the inputs and based on the outputs, right? Where
Yeah.
these models actually start to change to provide you that personalized response, even though that material might not exist specifically to that use case anywhere else online. It's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, well, you know what? We did that. The next segment is on Klarna's credit losses. And I sent, intern Cash and Crow to go find long-term data on Klarna's credit losses because if you go to their website does like they've got 1/4 of financial information on their finance tab, right? The company didn't
Right.
go public. So I can't
Yeah.
go through SEC filings. And
Right.
so Cashin called me and he said, I don't know what to do. And so I'm on the phone with him. I said, give me a minute, just hold. And I again went to one of these AI models and I said, give me Klarna's credit losses every quarter as far back as you can. And guess what? I
Mhm.
got several years of quarterly losses. And he said, how did you do that? How did you get it so fast? What prompt did you use? And you can copy the whole thing. I pressed the copy button and I just sent him the whole description, right? And so we're using this to get through research faster. And the truth is, there's no intellectual value to going and finding that data. The value is once you have the data to figuring out what to do with it. I knew what to do with the data.
That's right.
I was sending cash in to go get the data. Well, now it
Right.
it's even faster than calling one of the interns because you just type the question into a model and you get it. But I
Yep.
guarantee you, it's exactly what you said, Rob. That information did not come from one document,
Right.
right? They crawled multiple documents. So you couldn't go to a place to find it. You would have had to go to many places.
Right.
In this case, it's like having 100 analysts. They go find it.
Yeah, it's amazing. I read something on Twitter X, I think it was. It said AI is not replacing marketers. AI is replacing marketers that don't use AI,
Right.
which I think
Exactly.
is a great way to put it in the
Yeah.
grand scheme of things. All right, great stuff there. Great conversation, Gary. We got two more things actually, so we're going 6 things for this week. We got one more to close out, and then we'll get to our educational section on secured and unsecured debt. Again, you're watching The Government Needs a New Credit Score issue. We'd love if you could subscribe to the channel if you found any value. If you haven't, give us a thumbs down and leave a comment. Gary loves those more than anything, so bring it on. Or head to deepknowledgeinvesting.com, IR at deepknowledgeinvesting.com. You can also use the Ask Gary feature to send in any questions that you might have for the show. And be sure to, again, grab that free subscription. That'll get you access to all of the posts that are going online on the Deep Knowledge Investing website. Gary, you mentioned it. We're going to be talking Klarna. Klarna is one of the largest buy now, pay later, BNPL for short, providers that are out there in payment processing. You're going to tell us more about burrito-backed securitizations here, Gary, which I'm sure some of you out there are saying, what the hell are these guys talking about? Thing number 5, Klarna's credit loss dilemma. What do we need to know?
Yeah, this is going to lead to a huge problem, Rob. Klarna is one of the biggest buy now, pay later payment processing companies. Buy now, pay later has gotten big, right? At this point, it's over $1 trillion. I think a majority of young people are using it. It's more common for people to use it than not. Um, and unsurprisingly, more consumers are starting to fall behind on their payments, which is a huge problem for Klarna. It's also going to be a problem for those lenders because those losses, those non-payments are going to be calculated in people's credit ratings. So everybody's going to be unhappy with this. Last quarter, Klarna saw a 17% rise in consumer credit losses, reaching $136 million. That's a big number, right? That's a problem. And especially with more consumers falling behind, it's only going to get worse. Klarna last month delayed their US IPO. This is not going to make it better. Um, and right now, Klarna's credit losses as a share of total volume isn't a big number. It's well under 1%. That's a healthy number, but part of the problem is these loans are non-recourse, right? We joke about, burrito-backed securitizations, but there's nothing to repossess. So those losses are 100% losses, and they go straight to the bottom line. To give you a sense, in the last quarter, Klarna saw a 110% increase in total losses year over year. They went from 47 million of losses to 99 million of losses. Well, guess what? More than half of that increase uh, was the increase in their bad debt and their consumer credit losses, right? 17% of 136 million. You're talking about half the difference there. And so, it's really hard to do an IPO right when your credit statistics are cratering and when your losses go from 47 million to 99 million, right? You want to see as the business grows, you want to see scaling. It's okay if they're losing money, but you want to see as the revenue goes up, their losses come down and you see a path to profitability. Klarna's going the opposite direction. As their revenue goes up, their losses are increasing. It's very hard to do an IPO, an initial public offering, a first sale of the company's stock to the public markets when your finances look like that.
Gary, what could be the cause of these credit losses rising? I mean, do you think it is kind of more macro environment, people getting squeezed, or is this a situation where you have, yeah, a unique product and I guess a cool, exciting product, right? But maybe a product that shouldn't be in the hands of some of these consumers that really just don't understand basic finance and are overspending based on this access to this credit that they now had or now that they now have that they didn't have before, right at their fingertips.
So I think we have two problems. One, Rob, is inflation is really a problem for people. And when you look at long-term statistics, I'm talking about over 40 or 50 years. Over the last 40 or 50 years, American workers have not had a real increase in salaries. And somebody might say, well, no, I make so much more money now than my dad did 40 years ago. And that's true on a nominal basis, but what your dad could buy 40 years ago with his salary might have been bigger and better or more comfortable than what people now can buy. And we hear all these stories of people who graduate college with 4-year degrees, and they might be making, 60, $70,000 in a first job, which seems pretty good, right? But if for that job they've got to live in or near a big city, good luck paying the rent on that, and then having some money to clothe yourself or go out or pay your cable bill or your cell phone bill. The point of all this is congressional overspending has led to dollar debasement, inflation, and people are not staying ahead of inflation. The value of your dollars are decreasing faster than people are getting raises. And so we're starting to see people using buy now, pay later for DoorDash orders. And that's what leads to, all the jokes about repossessing a burrito or, we want the securitization for the people who ordered extra guacamole. Um, but the fact is, when people are using financing for their dinner order or their grocery bill, it's a sign that there's some real financial stress, and that's not a good thing. The other problem is we have an educational system that is designed to ensure that our young people are financially illiterate. Now, we're doing everything we can to address that here on this show, and we want to help people. But, people are graduating from high school right now with no sense of how finance works, how economics works. Most people can't balance a checkbook, right? Even basic things. And so, we keep seeing all of these videos, and don't get mad at me for this. This is, what other people do. But I'm sure you've seen, Rob, like the girl math videos where they say, hey, if I buy something and then I return it to the store, then I can take the money they gave me and spend it and that's free, right? But the fact is it's their money and they're spending it. It's not free. And so buy now, pay later is leading to a lot of like girl math kinds of things. Again, don't get mad at me. It's not my expression. They're the ones talking about it. But they're basically saying, if I buy something today and don't have to pay for it today, it's free. And the bill that I'm going to get in a month, that's for future me. I don't have to think about that. And I've seen enough videos on this to believe there are a lot of people thinking this way. And I've actually read statistics that young people somehow they use buy now, pay later regularly. And then a week later, a month later, they get the bill for it and they're surprised. They say, I don't understand. How is this working? why am I getting a bill? Right? And it literally, it's not even occurring to people that if you buy something using buy now, pay later and don't have to pay for it at point of purchase, I think a lot of people are thinking, well, it's free. I don't have to pay for it. Well, it's not. You're going to pay for it. You're just going to pay for it later or with a destroyed credit rating. So I think, girl math jokes aside, I think we have a lot of people, both men and women, who have this really weird idea that if you don't pay for something at the point of purchase, it's free. And the only thing I can tell you is it's not. Please do not use buy now, pay later for things you can't afford. The bill will come due, right? It's better to spend less or delay purchases. Now, look, if it's food, I get it. What are you going to do? Everybody has to eat. There's no way around it. But for those of you who are watching this, please be careful using buy now, pay later. It's something we've talked about regularly over the last year. I don't like to see people getting into trouble. I don't like to see American citizens getting into trouble. I don't like to see our viewers getting into financial trouble. We're trying to explain this stuff to help people stay out of it.
Yeah, great explanation there, Gary. And again, if you have any questions, feel free type into the show, leave a comment on this video, and we'll get back to you ASAP. To wrap up, we got a bonus, and that concludes for everyone this week's version of the 5 things to know in investing with Deep Knowledge Investing. The government needs a new credit score issue. Thank you so much for watching. If you could give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the show. If you didn't like watching us, no problem at all either. Give us a thumbs down. Let us know what you disagreed with or why you might think differently. We absolutely encourage it. Head to our website at deepknowledgeinvesting.com. You can sign up for a free subscription. That'll get you added to our newsletter where you'll get all the information you need on new posts happening on the DKI website. Gary, happy Memorial Day again to you. Thank you for doing this, and I'll turn it over to you for the final closing thoughts.
So, Rob, the most important thing here, again, is to recognize Memorial Day. As I said at the beginning of the show, my grandfather fought in World War II with the 80th Airborne. We were very proud of his service. Fortunately, he came home safely. I had another uncle in the Air Force, another uncle in the Navy. My dad was a member of the Michigan Air National Guard and we also have multiple people on the DKI Board of Advisors who have served in uniform. For everybody who has, we want to thank you for your service. For the families of people who have served, we want to thank you for your service and sacrifice. And we know that can't be easy. And then again, for those of you who are mourning the loss of a friend or family member today, we're so sorry for your loss and have nothing but respect for the sacrifices that your family has made and those people have made. Beyond that, Rob, I always love filming this with you, and Flying V has just poured so much time and energy and effort into helping this show grow and be better, and we really appreciate that. That's been terrific. DKI intern Cashin Crow had a fantastic week while traveling to Spain. We are all traveling here. We added a new intern this week from Rutgers, Samak Jain, who is in Hyderabad, India, because why would anybody be anywhere else? We're all in 3 different time zones, and but right away, immediately came in with a lot of energy, a lot of effort, and was a contributor in his first week. Really good to see, thrilled to see that. We also are excited for DKI subscribers. Like I said, it was a weird week with all kinds of tariff announcements and bad bond auctions in Japan, bad bond auctions in the US. The markets were very volatile. We were making money through it. Our subscribers were making money. We were well positioned for that. So I'm excited about that. Good to see. Again, for people who might have missed the beginning but are getting this, check out the website, and there is a post on the research tab that is not paywalled called "It's the Bond Market. Here's what we're doing," and it explains the way we're thinking about this. I think that's it's valuable for the rest of you. Thank you for spending your time with us. We know it's valuable, and we appreciate you being here with us watching the show. For those of you who want to like and subscribe, we'd love to have you as a part of the team here. But you know what? If you don't want to, we're not the boss. So you do whatever you want. It's good either way. Other than that, we are already preparing for next week's 5 things. We will look forward to seeing you in a week. I will be filming from Portugal. No word yet on where Rob's going to be. So we will see you from Lisbon, Portugal, 1 week from today. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.